Good thing he doesn't know how to put his bike in gear. Abrupt and jerky throttle is what can easily get us in trouble, especially with a powerful motorcycle. Luckily, we can avoid all this painful experience by using some throttle control tips and tricks. Let's take a look at them. First of all, let's look at the sum of the most common throttle-related mistakes, and then we'll learn how we can avoid them. There are four main types of mistakes which potentially can lead to a crash. First is when we open throttle too fast and our rear tire washes out because of that. Second is so-called whiskey throttle thing, when we open the gas and then can't release it, which makes us completely lose control over our bike. Third thing is uncontrolled wheelie. And fourth mistake is when we suddenly completely chop the throttle. And of course, there are all sorts of combinations of these mistakes. For example, if we open throttle too fast in a corner, start sliding and then suddenly release it, we can end up launching ourselves into space. Or as another example, we can make that uncontrollable whiskey throttle thing, which then can end up in a rather spectacular backflip. Either way, all that usually hurts. So let's see what we can do to prevent that. Let's start with our hand position. What a lot of people tend to do, especially the beginner riders, is they grab a throttle like this. And that makes sense. After all, we want to twist the throttle and off we go, right? But there are two problems here, actually. The first problem is that when you open throttle like this, in case you need to brake fast at some point, you either have to close the throttle, then reposition your hand and only then apply the brake, which will obviously require time. Or you risk grabbing the front brake when your gas is still open, which will almost certainly end up in a low side crash. Second problem is we must consider that when we roll on the throttle and bike starts to accelerate, our body gets pulled back like this, which causes the throttle to open even more. This is precisely why the whiskey throttle event usually happens. Now what we can do is we can grab the throttle the other way, with the straight wrist, like this. This way, we can close the throttle and begin braking almost simultaneously, and we get rid of that feedback loop which causes the whiskey throttle. Now, if our body gets pulled back, the throttle automatically closes, not opens. This way, we have much less chance to launch ourselves into somebody's fence. Another thing, don't have a dead grip on your throttle. Hold it like you would hold an egg. You hold it firmly enough to not drop it, but at the same time you don't want to crush the egg, so you don't grip it with all of your force. This is important for several reasons. First, by relaxing your arms and hands, you allow your front wheel to steer itself as it should and stabilize your bike as it should. Second, if you have a dead grip on a throttle, all vibration from the engine goes through handlebars straight to your arms. This way, your arms quickly become numb. And last but not least, by gripping your throttle too much, you're just wasting energy. You become tired very soon. Alright, that all seems pretty sweet, but you may already notice the problem with this grip, right? What if at some point we need to accelerate very fast? With this grip, we can't really fully open the throttle. Look at this skewed body. But there is a very easy fix for that. Obviously, if you need a lot of throttle, that means you need to accelerate really fast. And if you need to accelerate fast, you can lean your body forward like this. This way you reduce wind drag, you shift more weight forward, which allows you to accelerate faster without wheeling. And look at this, suddenly you can open full throttle without screwing up your arms. So you kill not two, but three birds with one stone, so to speak. Don't really kill the birds, by the way, it's just a figure of speech. And one more little detail. Try to lean forward just before acceleration, not when you already start twisting the throttle. That will give you the best possible body position to oppose the accelerating forces. And your wrist will be already in optimal place at the time you start rolling on the throttle. As an example, look at people who ride Moto Gymkhana courses. As you can see, they lean forward on acceleration and lean back when braking. This really helps with proper weight distribution on the wheels, and it allows you to use the throttle to a full extent without any problem. Okay, we have covered that. Now let's see how we can have more control and more precision with the throttle. To be more smooth and more precise, we can not only twist the throttle like this, with our wrist, but also we can use this twisting motion with our fingers. It provides us with finer control. Additionally, if you place 1 or 2 fingers on the brake lever, your brain can use this feedback from your fingers to know how much exactly you turned your throttle. I personally find it very helpful, so try it yourself, maybe you'll like it too. Another thing which you can use for a steadier throttle control is this fixed bar end, if you have one. You can rest part of your palm on it and use it like indicator of how much you opened or closed your throttle. And now, when we learned all these tips about throttle, it's time to practice. Though pretty much every exercise improves your throttle control one way or another, for practicing throttle I personally like 3 particular exercises. First one you can do pretty much every time you ride your bike, and it's pretty straightforward. When you are riding, try to accelerate and decelerate super smooth by opening and closing your throttle very slow. This way, over time you will develop a very good feel of your throttle, and you'll be able to make super fine adjustments to it. Try to use all the stuff we talked about sooner. Try this twisting motion with your fingers, try placing part of your palm on the fixed bar end, or try to rest your fingers on the brake lever. See what works and feels comfortable for you. Second good exercise for throttle control is a slow cone V. I have the whole separate video about this exercise, so I won't go all over it here. I'll just say that on this exercise you can practice holding the throttle still, no matter what your handlebars do. If you do the V in the friction zone, you should hold your throttle slightly opened and it should be steady. For example, look at this. Listen closely to the engine sound. As you can hear, it's pretty steady throttle, just as it should be. And here is example of bad throttle. As you can hear, it's just all over the place. In this particular case, it's a bad throttle cable adjustment. So the throttle automatically opens up and closes when you swing the handlebars. If you are experiencing this problem, check the throttle cable. But if it's okay, pay close attention to what are you doing with the throttle. You may open and close the throttle unconsciously when steering, and it's bad. And third exercise, which will greatly improve your throttle control, is fast figure 8. Fast figure 8 is a gymkhana style exercise which doesn't use friction zone, so here you'll have to be very careful and precise with your throttle, because it translates the power directly on the rear wheel. If you are jockey on the throttle, your bike will be jockey too. This exercise is a little bit more advanced, so before you do it, make sure you can easily do all our basic exercises, like circles, slaloms, full lock turns, etc. Set up 2 cones 40-50 feet apart and start making figure 8s around them. At first, you can make them as big as you want. For now, your goal is to become comfortable with the bike. Here, you don't use clutch at all, you just release it completely. Remember to turn your head into the turn, look for a line and keep your arms very loose and relaxed. Be in the first gear and for a while just make big, wide figure 8s. As you become comfortable, start working on your throttle. As you made a turn and see the exit, start slowly rolling on the throttle as your bike standing up, and then slowly roll off the throttle as it's time to slow down before the next turn. You can combine this with the rear brake technique for a smoother ride. I have described this technique in one of the previous videos. It's pretty useful, you can check it out if you want. I'll leave the link in the description. But anyways, after you spend some time with this exercise, you start to lean your bike more and more and you start accelerating harder. That's a good time to start to lean your body forward on acceleration and lean back on deceleration. Each time you become comfortable, start opening and closing your throttle a little bit faster, but remember to do it in a progressive manner, don't jerk it. After some time, you'll end up using your throttle pretty aggressively on a big lean angles, and you can be surprised how much throttle you can use while leaning, if you use it smoothly. Fast figure 8 is incredibly good exercise. Just take your time with it and don't hurry. You may need several training sessions with it, but be sure, once you master it, you won't recognize yourself on the bike, you'll be that much better rider. Alright, remember to check out the video about how you can make your bike less jerky on low RPMs. And please like, share and subscribe if you find these videos useful. See you next time. Adios!